From the liberal Northeast comes a lone voice of truth. Honest commentary in dishonest times. Think deeper with Juan Newsom. This is the Cure Radio Program. This is the Cure.
Hello. Welcome back to The Cure. Today we got a special guest, a friend of the show, an old friend of the show. He is the director of Unhyphenated America. You've seen him on Tucker Carlson, Fox and Friends, and a host of other shows. Chris Harris, how you doing, brother?
Juan, my brother, what's good with you?
What's going on, man? The world is on fire. What is going on? Look, cities are burning, statues are being torn. What's going on out there, man?
Look, things are being spray painted everywhere, right? I mean, this is a crazy world that we live in. Some might say that we're living the end of days, but I just think it's another day in this crazy ball of mud. And a lot of Americans have become insulated and isolated from the foolishness and wickedness that seems to inhabit most of the world. And now it's coming to, it's coming to visit upon us. So, yeah, nothing surprises me nowadays.
But this Black Lives Matter group, it seems, and they've admitted now that they are trained cultural Marxists. And some of the activities that they've been engaged in, it borderlines terrorism, if you ask me. Do you think that President Trump should consider placing a similar to what he did to Antifa, placing them on the terror list?
So, well, let me first start out by making a shameless plug for my organization. If you would, listeners, go ahead and check out the website. It's www.unhyphenatedamerica.org. And you'll see my smiling face. Not really smiling. My wife tells me I need to smile more. But you'll see my semi-smirk smile on the page right up there. We just had the site redesigned, so you'll see me front and center. But if you check out the website, you'll see one of the conversations we had was about Black Lives Matter, acknowledging that they are trained Marxists. And, one of the issues I think, Juan, is that a lot of people don't quite realize what Marxism is. Sometimes we have to actually inform and educate people before we can actually have a conversation with them. Yeah. So, people have to understand about what at its root, what its core, what Marxism is, right? And the average person, we talk, you and I might talk about things like the Marxist dialectic, which essentially is simply putting one people group against another people group. So it's putting the rich against the poor, black against white, a young against old, rich against, it's the whole thing. It's picking whatever identity group and putting it against another identity group. What's the purpose for that? It's to sow seeds of discord, because they hope that by sowing these seeds of discord, they can eventually sneak in under the cover of chaos, right? That's what the left is always trying to do, is to sneak in under the cover of chaos to establish their government, which we all know is the whole New World Order thing that they want to establish. But at the end of the day, it's simply where there is government by the few or by the elite.
It's funny. It's funny because on Black Lives Matter, they're always talking about the system, and they're always talking about this white supremacist system, and, institutional white supremacy. But the thing is, the left owns most of the major institutions. They own media, they own government, TV, radio, academia.
Check this out. See, it's ridiculous. It's asinine, to say the least, for somebody to talk about white supremacy and call themselves a Marxist, because last time I checked, Karl Marx was white as all get out, right? He's German, right? Yep. Can you get more white than German?
You can't get no whiter than that.
That's white bread, that's white, right? You just as white as you can be when you're German, right? And Marxism is white supremacy. Right. They might sit there and try to paint this picture, Juan, where they act as if this is something that's available to the masses of people. But I would encourage some of your other listeners to check. here's the challenge about doing what it is I do is, and this sounds so arrogant if you're somebody who thinks in that particular manner, but it's like I literally, because I've been studying this for 20 years, and one of the problems with me going on like Fox and Friends or whatever like that is that basically every time I go on Fox and Friends, I get like 90 seconds, right? So it's like I have to try to condense 20 years of studying in the 90-second sound bites. Right. And that's why one of the reasons I prefer doing radio's longer format podcasts like working with you is because we get a chance to really dive in and get into the nuance of these things. But like this whole idea of cultural Marxism is really nothing more than just a task. They understood that they could not defeat the United States militarily. So they understood they had to do it by the culture. And see, they actually thought that there would be a violent revolution that would take place simply because people would throw off the supposed yoke of oppression based on economic factors. Karl Marx did not think that that Marxism would really take root in places like in the backwards places like Russia and in China. He thought that it was really going to take root in industrialized places in the 18th century or 19th century, in places like London and in the United States. That's where he thought it was really going to take root. But one of the things he didn't realize is that from an economic standpoint, capitalism and free enterprise actually allowed people's quality of life to improve dramatically compared to the fiefdoms that existed before. That somebody, through utilizing capitalism for enterprise, could actually increase the quality of their life, that you wouldn't necessarily have to stay stuck in the same caste system that you were stuck in before. So when they realized that the economic model was not going to lead to a revolution, they said, okay, we have to work on this from a cultural standpoint. And so that's when they started pitting one group of people against another group of people. Now that ended up happening with people like Vladimir Lenin, and people need to do research because they start realizing that the communist, right? And communism is simply the wet dream, if you will, right? It's the idea that socialism will eventually, socialism has to be brought about by force, right? Socialism is force. Communism is the fantasy that after a period of time of force, that people will come to actually like this idea, right? And so what people like Lenin did is that they said, hey, we see a prime opportunity here in a place like the United States that has a certain amount of diversity with blacks and whites and so on and so forth, to say, hey, there's this group of people who've been oppressed, if you will. Let's go ahead and work with them. We'll implant agents within them, right? And we'll train these people up, and we'll talk about the fact of how you've been treated so unfairly within your country. This is what this is what communism, socialism, and communism did. And there's men like Leonard Patterson. And I would suggest that your listeners rather, go ahead and do a Google search, or you can go ahead and take a look on the unhyphenatedamerica.org Facebook page, unhyphenatedamerica.org website, another shameless plug. And you look and you'll see Leonard Patterson. You'll see this man will talk about how he was recruited by people, the Leninists out there, to try to become freedom fighters until he realized that socialists or communists in this regard didn't give a rat's furry butt about the plight of black people in America. They simply wanted to use people of color, black people specifically, to help bring down the left. And what did he realize is that life was better for blacks in America than it was anywhere else in the world.
Yeah. That happened in France too, remember? Was it in France as well? Where you had the Socialist French Party, the Socialist Revolutionary Party of France, and the workers of France as well. They, there was a revolt there, and, they were looking, the communists infiltrated there, and they were trying to revolt against the government, revolt against all the institutions there. Am I correct in saying that, Chris? Because I know you're familiar with.
Well, I mean, okay, man, it's funny because post-World War II, socialism spread. I mean, it was a rather dark time from 1945 up until basically when Ronald Reagan became president, or when Margaret Thatcher became prime minister of the United Kingdom. Because I mean, you remember that
And the
here.
Pope John
And
Paul
Pope John
II.
Paul, that trifecta, Pope John
Yeah.
Paul II, Margaret Thatcher, and Ronald Reagan were some of the stalwarts, the people who fought against socialism to help bring it down. But it's a shame that great men like Winston Churchill, who stood and stared in the face of the National Socialist German Worker Party. Make sure you focus on that socialist, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. If your listeners don't know who that is, that's the translation for what the Nazi Party stood for. They were the National Socialist German Workers' Party, just like the Soviet Union was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Are you seeing a trend here? Right, these are all socialist places. But what happened is a shame with with England is shortly after they had a great leader like Winston Churchill who stood in the gap, face down Adolf Hitler, who Neville Chamberlain, the former Prime Minister of England, was trying to appease. Winston Churchill stood down and stared down Adolf Hitler, and he helped to lead the United Kingdom through World War II. And what ended up happening? Promptly after they finished World War II, the British people got rid of Winston Churchill and decided they wanted to implement what? Socialism. Right? I mean, it's a shame. When you study history, Juan, you realize that history repeats itself because human nature doesn't change. And since human nature doesn't change, it tends to repeat itself, especially when people fail to study and learn the lessons of the past.
And so here, when I look at American history, and given the fact the history of socialism, communism, and how it spread it like disease across the world, I can't help but to notice the influences in America. You have, a lot of groups here, especially in the 40s, 50s, 60s, influenced by Russian communism, and then you have, and they were also influenced in other ways too. Just look at the people that are fleeing across our borders every day. A lot of those countries were influenced by Russian communism. And then if you look at our university systems as well, but also Chinese communism has infiltrated our universities as well as Russian communism. So my question to you, how can we put these fiery darts out? Because it just seems like it's coming from all places. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there has been some stories as of recently. There have been a couple of scientists in academia that were arrested for alleged, for ties to the Chinese Communist government. So how do we tie that in? How do we reconcile that? And, how do we put these fiery darts out? Because, I mean, we're getting hit on all sides.
So here's what's interesting about COVID-19. I mean, there's all sorts of conspiracy theories as to, how COVID-19 was released. That maybe it was some sort of plot or plan against the United States. It's just another way for the left to try to get President Trump out. I mean, there's all sorts of conspiracy theories out there. But let's assume that they're true. Let's assume that the left did work with communist China to release that. Here's the thing about the left, as diabolical as they may seem on occasion, and how they seem to be so far forward thinking. In many cases, they don't really think about unintended consequences. So, for example, one of the unintended consequences of COVID-19 is how it's affected the education system.
Yeah.
See, parents, and you're a parent and you realize what a pain in the butt it was for all of a sudden you and your family, you and your wife are so used to your kids being able to go off to school, whether it's public school or private school, for 6-8 hour days, whatever the time of the day that your kids go off. And now all of a sudden you've had to make these massive change in your lifestyle for you to actually be there educating your child.
Yep.
Well, here's the thing. What we've been able to do, and what a lot of Christian constitutional conservatives have done, Juan, is they're sitting there now. They're taking a closer look at the curriculum that their children are being taught. And they're sitting there taking a more active role in their child's education. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of parents who are kind of tired because this has been a toll on them. But a lot of parents are sitting there going, I think my child is actually learning more, advancing faster as a result of being home and taking part in what is essentially homeschooling. But ask yourself this question, Juan. When is the last time that you ever look at like Ebony Magazine, Jet Magazine, or any of those magazines, and they talk about the exceptional young Black Americans, right? And they'll say, oh, this young man, this young woman graduated from high school at 14 years old and got their degree at 18 years old from college, or they got, have you noticed almost without fail that those kids are all homeschooled?
Yep. Yeah, I've definitely noticed that.
So you start realizing, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'll say, yeah, I definitely noticed that.
So what you start realizing is that is the current education system the most effective and efficient means of educating a child? Not by any stretch of the imagination. And so people are sitting there beginning to question, I believe. I've had enough conversations with parents, and they're beginning to question the necessity or at least the system as it is, right? And now people are sitting there, they're beginning to examine and say, hey, there are other resources out there for homeschooling parents, and they can look in the free market. I love the free market. It's a beautiful thing. They can look in the free market and look at educational resources, and they can say, hey, you know what? I don't want my children being taught Marxism. I want them to learn history as it actually was, maybe in a way that identifies with my values as a Christian constitutional conservative. And they're beginning to realize that the educational, and I call it I got to take a step back here. One is when President Dwight D. Eisenhower, when he was leaving office, in his farewell speech, one of the things he did is he warned America about the about the military-industrial complex, and he went on to talk about how as the Cold War was ratcheting up, and we needed to be mindful of the fact that if you look at the numbers, you'll see the spending, military spending was relatively huge. It was a large portion of the federal government budget, right? And so he was saying that we needed to warn or be weary of the growing encroachment of the military-industrial complex, right? And listen, I don't have any problem with what he was saying, but we also had to be aware of the fact of during that next decade or so, communism exploded across the country, and so we needed the military to grow to kind of help check the growth of communism, right? But here's the thing: when you fast forward to 1980, when President Jimmy Carter decided to take the Department of Education and make it its own separate agency, because it used to be part of Health and Human Services. We decided to break it out into its own separate agency. And by the way, Juan, I went and did some research, and rough estimates is that since 1980, the federal the congressional outlays to the Department of Education are close to $1 trillion that have been given over to the Department of Education, right?
Wow.
Now, ask yourself this question. See, I mean, I'm 47 years old. I know you're in your 40s also. Would you honestly say that our kids have gotten smarter since 1980?
No, I mean, I've done a little research myself. And when you look at the global competitive index, historically for education, before that breaking off, before the expansion of the Department of Education, because that's the real reason why they broke off, so that they can expand, the U.S. was very competitive in terms of, quality of education and ranking and, how our students rank. We were anywhere between number 1 and number 3 any given year. But now look at us. We slid way down the list. So no, our children are not better off overall. And then you compound that with failing programs like Common Core that, are teaching our children ridiculous ways to do math and other things that are just unconventional and unnecessary. And you just made the problem that much worse.
Absolutely. So, here it is. You had Eisenhower warning in 1960 rather, about the military industrial complex. But what needs to happen is somebody needs to raise the alarm about the educational industrial complex. And it's taken something like COVID, which maybe was not some sort of grand cabal conspiracy to release this illness upon the world, right? But what that has done, the unintended consequences that the left probably didn't take into account is the fact that parents are beginning to really question the educational content that their kids are receiving, probably more so than any other time. And I don't know about you up in your neck of the woods, but down here in Virginia, one of the things that was recently announced is that they're not planning on having the kids go back to school in the fall, like and so what it is. So parents are now having to make other arrangements and be prepared to further homeschool their kids. I would guess that having parents play a bigger role in the education of their kids is going to have a significant impact in the mindset of these kids. I think that the next generation will be less likely to be little turd blossom, museum grade morons out there
destroying
rioting.
statues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's think about this. Here I am I'm in the Metro DC area, the District of Columbia. I mean, you know about the fact that these little turd blossoms, and that's my favorite term to use for them. It just kind of paints a picture. But there is such a thing as a turd blossom. But even when you just hear the word turd blossom, you're like, I don't know what that is, but it sounds bad. Yeah, it's bad, right? But these little turd blossoms, right? I mean, you look at what they're doing, Juan. You see that they're ready to they're ready to tear down a statue in Washington, D.C. of President Abraham Lincoln freeing the slaves.
Yep.
I mean, when you listen to the recording of the people who were just screeching little banshees and they're complaining about, well, we didn't vote for this. We didn't plan on being this here. Well, first of all, that statue is federal government property. Okay, so that's a whole other conversation. But that statue was actually paid for entirely by freed slaves and also largely by blacks who fought on the Union side of the Civil War. And here it is, you fast forward 150 years, and these little inbred turd blossoms want to tear down this statue.
Yeah, I have a huge problem with that. The fact of the matter, they tore down Ulysses S. Grant too. And the guy who fought aside Lincoln pretty much to free the slaves.
Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia, he surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant.
Yep, exactly. Right?
I mean, this is crazy. This is madness, Juan.
This is absolutely madness. I don't know where we go from here because I honestly never saw any of this coming. The tearing down the statues, the vandalizing of statues, the taking over of 6 city blocks in Seattle. And it's complete madness out here. And you know what's funny? Democrats are silent on this crap.
Well, I'm gonna tell you why they're silent, Juan. Here's the thing, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The Democrats are Dr. Frankenstein. See, it's funny because in pop culture, people refer to the monster as Frankenstein, but the monster was not Frankenstein. The creator of the monster was Dr. Frankenstein. So basically, the monster was Dr. Frankenstein's monster. Antifa and Black Lives Matter are Dr. Frankenstein's monster. They are the creation of the left. They're the ones created by Democrats, people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. And they were of the impression that they could control this monster. They figured, I created this monster, I can control it. But you can you can reverse and go back to 2015, 2016, and look when Hillary Clinton was on the campaign trail, and you had Black Lives Matter, those little cretins, little scumbags out there. They bust up in one of Hillary's fundraisers, and they took a microphone. The Black Lives Matter went up there and took the microphone away from Bernie Sanders at one of his campaign stops.
Oh yeah, right? I saw that.
So what you're finding is that the left is Dr. Frankenstein, and they thought that they had control of this creation. But see, this is the danger of man trying to play God. When you sit there and you try to create, you try to craft this monster and think you can have control of them, what if the monster decides to act according to their free will?
It's confusing out there. So what does this mean for the election this year? Because it seems like you go back a few weeks ago, of course, last month, there were 2.5 million jobs added to the rolls. And it seems like COVID was dying down. And coming into the beginning of the year, let me go back to then. President Trump was cruising to re-election. Economy is good. Stock market is good. Corporate buybacks up. People are buying stuff. Consumer confidence up. Black unemployment at a all-time low. Women's unemployment. Latino unemployment. And so before COVID hit, everything was fine. And so, okay, COVID hit. Okay, there was a little mix up, but Trump got ahead of things and he put together the task force. And then eventually the death rate started going down and the number of people testing positive for the disease started going down. And so it looked like he was recovering. But now you add this element in with George Floyd and all of the riots and the vandalisms and the fires and all of this chaos. What does that mean for the election? Because there's so much confusion out there. And Trump is going to be relying on independents and blue collar Democrats and conservative pro-life Democrats that don't have a home. And I know some of these people, maybe lean a little left occasionally. So I'm just wondering, what does that mean for his prospects?
So I'll tell you one, my only concern is mail-in voting.
Yep.
Right? Mail-in ballots, because that's dangerous. That's scary. Right? I mean, we've already seen, case in point, look at what happened when President Trump had his rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, keep in mind that the number of people, there's a lot of people who were unwilling to show up just because of they're scared of the possibility. I mean, the nonstop, every day, all day, the left has just been hammering us, beating us upside the head with scare tactics about COVID-19. Now, is COVID-19 real? Yeah, it's real. Have people died from complications related to COVID-19? Yes. I mean, I think that's pretty well established. But is the morbidity rate of COVID-19 anywhere near as high as people would believe? No. I mean, I think it's something like, and I don't remember off the top of my head, so don't quote me on this, but I believe it's something like 2%, less than 2%, like 1.8% of the people who contract COVID-19 actually die from it. And even those who do die from it, when you start breaking those numbers down further, the demographics show that it's usually people who are over the age of 70. And that's like something like 75% of the people who have died from COVID-19 related complications were over the age of 70 and generally had some pre-existing condition. So there's that issue, right? So when you fast forward, there's a lot of people who probably desired to come to the Trump rally, but decided that they weren't quite willing to take that risk. But even there's, I think that there still would have been many more people who would have shown up, except for the fact that the left brags about the fact that they basically tried to trash or crash the servers for that they bragged that they went online and they did something like 200,000 RSVPs. And so if you're somebody who was wanting to go and you were willing to go to the Trump rally and you try to buy a ticket and you see that your number, this is a Coliseum arena that holds, let's say, 15,000 people, and you see that your ticket holder number 250,000, are you really going to try to show up? See, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and all the little turd blossoms like her proudly proclaimed how they basically crashed the servers and how they bought up and they did all the RSVPs to keep people from being able to go.
Wow.
So I mean, you can go online, you can Google that.
I saw it. I saw the interview when she said, they had an effort going on. They were using TikTok to kind of coordinate it. And so they basically, I think everything said, you're looking at a concentrated effort to suppress the conservative vote in addition to cheating in the election. So this is going to be a tough one.
So ask yourself this question, Juan. If they were willing to go to that extent to simply block President Trump from having a full house at a rally, what would they be willing to do if we went to a mail-in ballot system?
Oh, they'll cheat.
Cheating is, there's got to be another word beyond cheating, right? Because here's the crazy thing. I mean, let's say, for example, that there's 180 million. I can't remember. It's been a while since I looked at the numbers, but let's say out of 325 million, whatever the total number of people in the United States of America, let's say there's 180 million eligible voters. I believe that the overall voter turnout has never been more than like 65, 70% tops of the eligible voters.
That's
Trust
true.
and believe this one. Believe with every ounce of your being that the left, first of all, they're stupid. They're morons, right? That trust and believe that, there's old Democrats saying, I guess it's a California Democrat, excuse me, Illinois, Chicago more specifically, Democrats saying is that vote early and vote often, right? So trust and believe. If we went to an all mail-in ballot system, we'd have something like 250 million ballots cast, right? And you're sitting there going like, yo, there's not even 250 million adults in the United States of America, let alone 250 million adults who are eligible to vote. How the heck did we get 250 million mail-in ballots? Trust and believe the left would go and do that.
Yeah.
Just as a way to try to prevent President Trump from being reelected, because they've tried everything, Juan. I mean, a cabal was done from the beginning when they realized, and they had that oh crap moment at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning when it was announced that he actually won. At some point, they went into action. They were like, "Holy crap! We need to go ahead and do something to bring this guy down." They had already been planning to try to undermine him to keep him from having a fighting chance. But when he actually won, despite all their machinations to prevent him from winning, you know that they were panicking in everything they've done since then. All the accusations, the Russian collusion, the being in the bed in Moscow, and having Russian hookers peeing in the bed, and all the crap that they talked about, the dossier, all those things were all done out of desperation to try to undermine and the duly elected president of the United States. And they know that with the economic growth that we've had in the United States of America, that and the peace. Let me back up and say this one. I did Turkish radio and television. Once again, another shameless plug. I was on Turkish radio and television on election night of 2016. And the guy I was sitting there next to was the head of the Progressive Policy Institute. And he was a real snarky kind of guy, man. He just, as a matter of fact, actually not even snarky. He was a smug kind of guy. And as I was saying, I said to him, I don't believe this election is going to turn out quite the way that you think it is. And he held up his phone and said, "Oh, no, here it is. We have all the data that shows basically that Hillary is going to win by a landslide." And I was like, "Yeah, okay. I just don't think that's going to happen the way it did." And, we know what happened. Fast forward, obviously, Hillary did not win, which I would have given, I'd have gave all my life income to be able to have video of Hillary Clinton being notified that she actually lost. I would love to see the video of her losing it. Anyway, it's a whole other conversation. So, you fast forward 4 days later, Turkish radio and television, or 3 days later, they had me back on. And of course, they identified me as Christopher Harris, Republican. I'm like, well, I am a registered Republican, but I'm a conservative more than anything else. And I made it clear that I actually, did not cast my ballot for President Trump. I actually wrote in for Ben Carson because I did not believe, I was not so much a never Trumper. I did not believe that President Trump was who he was campaigning to be. Based on everything that I'd seen in the past, I did not have a reason to believe that he was going to be a conservative. Now, I said, listen, in the future, if he does a couple of things, if he helps to strengthen the United States military, if he helps to restore our standing on a national stage, because that's one of the things the president does, right, is he's the commander in chief. So if you help to strengthen the United States military, you're doing your job. Thumbs up to you. If you help to strengthen our standing on the global stage as head of state of the United States, you get you get kudos from me. And if you help to shrink the size and scope of the federal government as chief executive officer of the United States of America, then you get kudos from me. I said, and if he does those things, he will have my unabashed support in 2020. Well, guess what? Cha-ching, he has governed in a way more conservatively than George W. Bush did.
Yeah,
and so
he has.
Unashamedly has my support.
Yep.
And guess what? Americans, Juan, are looking and they've said, well, have we been involved in any senseless wars? No.
Nope. Nope.
The world is essentially at peace, relatively speaking. I mean, that's a relative term, but essentially the world is at peace.
Yep.
What's our
You're right.
standing on the international stage, Juan? We're generally respected around the world
Yep.
because people fear us in some regards, but they also see the economic stability and they see that they can't push us around. So we're respected on the international stage. And what has he done? He's done all that he could do with the tools he had available to help shrink the size and scope of the federal government. And so he's done everything within his power without having an active or the full support of the United States Congress, obviously with Nancy Pelosi being Speaker of the House. He's done
Yep.
everything that he could really do. And so for you to be a never Trumper, I mean, a general for you to be a never Trumper makes you a moron.
Yeah. I don't really at this point, and I know we've had these conversations in the past, I don't really understand the pathology of the never Trumpers. I think a lot of these guys are butthurt
But hurt
because they're
that's my favorite word.
well, they are because they're out of power.
Hmm.
President Trump did embrace a few establishment figures. He had H.R. McMichaels in there. He had John Bolton for a little while there. But for the most part, um, the people like Max Boots and Steve Smith, they haven't, they're not going on any
George
cruises.
Will and all those
George
people.
Will, they've been on the outs, and rightfully so. These guys have been wrong for 30 plus years. So it's time for some new blood in there. And, I personally don't blame President Trump for not including some of these guys in his, in his inner circle.
Well, so I just did Chinese. So I mean, I've been doing the whole round the world thing, man. It's like I've done CNN, I've done Fox, with Tucker Carlson and Fox and Friends multiple times. I did Turkish radio and television, and I just did Russian television last week, and then I messed around and did Chinese television earlier this week. So I've just been doing around the world, man. Right, but
Mm-hmm.
the interview I did with Chinese television. Um, they wanted to talk about John Bolton and the credibility what they have. And of course, it's interesting when you do shows like that and you're doing a panel. And essentially, it's one conservative against three, stark raving mad, bark at the moon leftists, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because the host is a leftist foreigner, right? One of the people they had also was, I guess he's some foreign correspondent for the White House, and the other one was a black Marxist Democrat out of Atlanta, right? And so, of
Mm-hmm.
course, one of the things that they tried to beat up on me, and of course beat up on President Trump. And since I was there, they tried to act as I was his proxy, and they tried to beat up on me. But I ain't going out like no punk, So that ain't gonna happen. I came out swinging. But the things they talked about was they tried to talk about the turnout at Trump's rallies, of course, and I talked about the same things I just told you about. Is that of course the turnout was low. Look at what the left did to try to decrease the turnout, and they tried to talk about the fact that they said, oh well, the economics has not been as good as everybody believes it is. The black unemployment rate was nowhere near as good, and I'm like, listen, you're lying. Okay, at the end of the day, everybody knows more black folks were able to find jobs and find good paying jobs, and that the unemployment rate among blacks and minorities in general, women in particular, was lower than any other time. But of course, they tried to find some way to wiggle out of that and not give him credit for those things. And the reason why is really simple, Juan. They need to be able to try to paint the picture that things have not gotten economically better. And if things have not gotten economically better, and he's not the nice, warm, fuzzy guy who dances to Al Green like Obama did, then there's no reason to reelect this guy. But
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows, and my wife and I had this conversation. We asked back when the Trump tax cut kicked in. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people were like, well, I hadn't seen any change. I'm like, well, have you actually looked at your paycheck? See, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, their checks are direct deposited. And now I'm the one who monitors my family finances. So I know what our income is. And I noticed that there was a pretty decent increase in our income. Thank you, Jesus, because we pay a
Yep.
lot of money in taxes.
Yep.
I'm blessed,
Same
in
here.
that regard. But I mean, to see that increase due to a cut in our tax rate. And we asked, my wife and I asked a few people, well, go and look at your, direct deposit. Was it higher or not? And people had to go and look at many of the people who did choose to respond back. They're like, oh yeah, I actually did get more money in my check. Now, there were people who complained later on in 2018 or whatever the year was, April or whatever, after tax returns. They were like, well, yeah, but my tax return was lower. And you're like, oh, Lord Jesus, do I really have to sit you down with this and say, like, if you usually got a $2,000, just to throw out a number, if you only got a $2,000 tax return, but every month you're getting, let's say, an extra $1,500, excuse me, extra $150 in your paycheck.
You get it more in your check. Yep.
You get more of your check throughout the year. And so at the end of the year, your tax return might have been, let's just say, $1,000. So instead of focusing on the fact that your tax return was $1,000 less, how about the simple fact that you got something like 1,800, or I forgot, my brain's fuzzy on doing math right now. What is that? $150 a month.
About $150 a month. That comes out to about 16 something for the year. So
yeah, 1650. Yeah, was it 1650? Yeah, no, yeah. Anyway, the 1650 throughout the year, give or take, that you kept throughout the year, and then you got $1,000. Hello, that means you got to keep an extra, let's say, $650 throughout at the total in the year. But throughout the year, you got $1,500. So don't sit there and try to tell me that you didn't see a difference throughout the year.
Yeah.
But see, they're trying to lie to people and say, no, we didn't really actually get that money, and Trump's tax cuts and his economic policy didn't really benefit anybody, and things. And they sit there and try to tell that bold-faced lie, Juan, that things were better for blacks economically under Obama. That is a lie from the pit of hell.
The labor participation was way down under Obama. The number of people on food stamps, the number of minorities on food stamps under Obama. I mean, there's just so many things. Even the misery index was up. Life expectancy went down under Obama. So it so many things that you and I could probably point out that were negative under that president. Especially wages and labor and in terms of unemployment.
But hold on a second, though, Juan. But Obama was a nice guy. He spoke so well. I mean, he wasn't on Twitter. He wasn't on Twitter saying all the terrible things. And, it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm getting more money in my pocket and the world is more at peace overall and so on and so forth. But I just wish we had that nice guy back, right? I mean, because how many people are caught up on words instead of actual deeds?
I can't feed my kids with that, Chris.
Listen, man. So to answer, we've gone all the way around the world to come back and give a short answer to your question about the election. I believe the election is going to come down to the leaners, as I refer to them. The leaners are the people who have been cowed into not speaking openly about their beliefs or who they plan to support, but it's the people, that guy, that coworker, that cousin, that brother, that whatever, who leans into you, Juan, and says, I like that Trump guy.
I got a few family members. I have a few family members that are staunch Democrats that are voting for Trump this time around.
Yeah. Now, but how many of those people will publicly say it, Juan?
Yeah, they're not going to publicly say it. They told me, though. They said, look, man, one of my cousins, he's a Democrat and he works in government. And he said, look, man, I'm starting to really like Trump because this guy, he's just not, he's different. He's not like the others. He can't be bought. And I just like his no nonsense attitude. I feel like he does what's best for the country. And so if he's saying that, and then my 20-year-old daughter, I'm not going to even tell you what she said, but she just looking at the environment and looking at the things that are being thrown at the president, she didn't say whether she was going to vote for him or not, but she sees the fiery darts and she sees some of the unfair treatment that this president has had. And then a few other relatives have approached me. So I don't know. I mean, I think you're gonna have a lot of people that are usually on the fence, kind of take and assess the environment and come out and vote for this president. Especially since he has the field. Joe Biden is nowhere. Where is Joe Biden?
Joe Biden doesn't know where he is. Okay, I mean, apparently they just agreed to do debates, but I'm sure that in some way, shape, or form they're going to try to avoid that because Joe Biden cannot speak for more than 2 or 3 minutes without saying something absolutely ridiculous. You know, I mean, and they know. I mean, you know, now what's going to happen is there going to be some sort of backroom deal that once he secures a nomination, maybe he'll decide to resign, allow his VP to proceed and run. I mean, who knows? I mean, that's only the left knows, right? But at the end of the day, nobody is going to honestly sit here and say that Joe Biden is in full possession of his faculties. I mean, it's rather sad.
He's not. It's crazy because why? I mean, does winning mean that much? Could they? I mean, this guy Trump, they didn't even want him to have the 4 years in the White House. So if he wins, if President Trump wins re-election, they are really going to lose their marbles. I mean, what's next? They're going to do another impeachment?
I just had somebody ask me this question once. They were like, "Well, what do you think's going to happen? You know, do you think that everything will calm down?" I said, "Listen, I wish I could tell you that when Trump leaves, because I'm going to say that I believe that he's going to win. In fact, I believe that he'll win in a larger percentage. Now, will he have the Ronald Reagan in '84 or Nixon in '72 just total sweep of the Electoral College map and have nearly 500 Electoral College votes? I don't think so. I do believe that he'll have probably close to 400 Electoral College votes, and I believe that he'll probably win maybe 50.1% of the, I think he'll actually win a majority of the popular vote, but we don't elect presidents based on popular vote. We elect them based off the Electoral College vote.
Yeah.
But here's a side note for all your listeners to go out and look. Here's the thing. Do you know that no one named Clinton has won a majority of the popular vote? Now, I know everybody's saying, well, Hillary won the popular vote. Yes, Hillary Clinton won a plurality of the popular vote.
Yeah.
But when her husband won in 1992, he did not win the majority of the popular vote. He won a plurality. So he did not get 50%. He did not get 50.1%. I think he got like 47% or something like that, right? But then in 1996, in his successful re-election campaign, I believe he still only got like 49%. So he never won a majority of the popular vote. And Hillary did not win a majority. She won a plurality of the popular vote. Right? And she lost the Electoral College vote. What I believe is that President Donald J. Trump will not only win a majority, at least 50.1% of the popular vote, he will win a larger number of Electoral College votes in 2020 than what he won in 2016. The problem is, Juan, is that is not going to bring about any sort of peace, because just like seeing a toddler throw a temper tantrum in Walmart, the left is going to lose their mind. So I'm sorry to have to tell your listeners, the people around the country, around the world, that the left, as of, was it November 3rd or whatever day the election day is, when President Trump, when it's announced that he has won re-election, lock and load, be prepared. The left is going to go in full temper tantrum mode. That if you think that we've had to endure 4 years of hell so far, it's not going to get any better in his reelection. I'm sorry to tell you.
Wow.
I mean, the left has already shown us who they are. And as Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you who they are, Juan, believe them the first time. The left has now, they've taken off the mask. They're no longer trying to hide behind a mask of civility. They are outright, out of the closet communists.
Wow, that's loaded. That's a lot to unpack. That's a lot to unpack, and it should be expected. And this, I try to remind people this is what pushback looks like. It's not going to get better anytime soon, even after Trump. And there's going to be a post-Trump era. And you know what? We're going to have to get ready to. We're going to have to go to war, like he does, maybe even more, because it's not going to be that easy to take our country back. These leftists have our institutions, and we either have to fight to get our institution back, or we have to create new ones.
Well, I mean, in terms of first of all, the easiest thing to do is the smartest thing to do is to simply stand. I tell people we don't have to. Some people say we need to go on the offense. No, we don't necessarily have to go on the offense. We simply need to stand in defense, right, against the left. Just simply don't let them push you. It's like I'll give you an analogy, help to paint a picture for you. Remember Steven Seagal, the 90s, 2000 action, Steven Seagal practiced Aikido. And remember watching, Steven Seagal rarely ever went out and just hit people. He let people come to him and he just tossed them all over the place, right? We essentially need to practice Aikido. When they come at us, just go ahead and divert them, flip them around, so on and so forth. And maybe we might need to break a bone here or there, right? But we don't have to go out there and attack them. We simply need to stand for what we believe. Do not let them lay a hand on us. That's the thing. That's the issue with the proverbial silent majority here in the United States of America, is that we have been silent for way too long, and we need to stop being so silent. Or if we're going to be silent, take a stronger stance. Say no more. Say this is ridiculous, and I'm not going to let it happen. Not on my watch. More of us who are proverbial sheepdogs, right, need to stand up, because there are wolves out there who are trying to prey upon the weaker among us. And if you're a sheepdog, and once again, shameless plug, my Twitter handle is Black Sheepdog. If you're a sheepdog, it's time for you to get out front, because there are wolves out there who are trying to pick off the sheep among us. And we have a responsibility, those of us who are sheepdogs, to stand up and be ready, willing, and fight. As Thomas Sowell said, is that the fight for civilization comes down to the barbarians versus the wimps. The barbarians are going to win. But if there are more of us who are sheepdogs who are willing to stand in the gap, remember, these people don't really want to fight. They're bullies. Bullies never really want to fight. Bullies want to pick on people who are unwilling or unable to fight back. So when you step up to them, now you might have to punch them in the nose, literally or metaphorically, right? But once you punch them in the nose, they realize this ain't what they want, because they wanted an easy mark. And when they realize this ain't going to be no easy mark, they're going to stand down, or they're going to walk away.
Yeah. Well, we got a little bit of work to do on this bully, Chris. I mean, these people, they're after the soul of the country. They're literally after the soul. And I never thought that they would go to such great lengths to keep this stronghold on. Oh, man, we're approaching an hour here, brother. So, man, thanks for being on today. As usual, your point of view and your analysis is spot on. Where can my audience find you again, Chris?
They can go to the website, which is www.unhyphenatedamerica.org. And I really appreciate people tuning in. The website, just to spell it out for you, is UNHYPHENATED America. Hopefully I don't have to spell out America for you, but it's unhyphenatedamerica.org. Got some good stuff up there. Got some other writers coming on. You can find the website at unhyphenatedamerica.org, or you can go and check out the Facebook page, which is just Unhyphenated America. And I really appreciate folks listening in. I like to hear responses from your listeners. And of course, my goal is always to be, every time I come on your show, to be the #1 podcast on your show, Juan.
Absolutely, that streak hasn't been broken. Thanks a lot, Chris. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, brother.
This is The Cure.